And it is kind of difficult to wrap your head around not keeping up with AI, but growing with it.
Hello there. My name is Monica Burns, and welcome to today's bonus episode of the Easy EdTech podcast. If you're used to joining me on Tuesdays for new episodes, you are in for a treat. This is a special bonus episode of the podcast in partnership with JotForm. Just like on Tuesdays, these bonus episodes are designed to give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. If we mention something you'd like to check out, you'll find the link to it in the show notes. So don't forget to head to my website, easyedtechpodcast.com, for all of the links and resources from today's episode. This episode is part of a special bonus series presented by JotForm. JotForm provides an all-in-one solution to streamline administrative tasks, enhance community engagement, and foster innovation. Using their no-code, drag-and-drop forms and workflows, your teams can securely collect and store data, automate routine tasks, and collaborate on team resources. Educational institutions are also eligible for a 30% discount on JotForm Enterprise. Head to their website to learn more. jotform.com/enterprise/education. And a quick note, this episode is part of a special bonus series. You can find the video version exclusively on JotForm's YouTube network. Today, I'm talking with Dr. Chaunté Garrett, a former superintendent, chief academic officer, and the founder of Empowering Learners and Leaders to Excel. We're tackling a big question, a critical question in education, which is how do we support the whole child in an increasingly tech-heavy world? Now, Dr. Garrett shares lots of strategies for addressing academic, social, physical safety through very intentional systems. So today's episode is a fantastic one for anyone who's trying to find a balance between the use of digital tools, thinking about ed tech in the classroom, as well as supporting the whole child. Let's get into the conversation. Welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to have you on today to talk about supporting the whole child in a tech-heavy world, in today's digital classrooms. But before we get into all of that, can you share a bit with listeners, what is your role in education? What does your day-to-day look like?
Great. Thank you. And it's an honor to be with you again, Dr. Burns. Monica. Yeah. My name is Dr. Chaunté Garrett, and I serve as the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Empowering Learners and Leaders to Excel. And what we do, we empower school and district leaders to overcome harmful systems, but also to build effective systems that support the whole child through data-driven strategies that empower leaders, that use whole child data. And so that's a holistic view of data and support instructional excellence throughout the whole school so that we can improve outcomes throughout the educational ecosystem.
And so as you work with schools and districts, right? It's you support a wide range of learners and collect, right, data that helps drive, right, some of the decisions, that schools are taking, districts are taking. One of the things that I'm sure is part of that conversation is how to nurture the whole child. And when you hear that phrase, nurturing the whole child, what does that mean to you in today's classroom? What do you want other people to hear when they hear that
Well,
phrase?
The way that we frame it through empowering learners and leaders to excel, and we've developed this, Monica, we have engaged each other through an organization, ASCD. Now it's the ASCD, so that's how we became partners through this business, right? And so from their framework that initially started Healthy, Safe, Engaged, Challenged, and Supported, The way that we have developed our model is one that supports academic safety, social safety, and physical safety.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is that the environment is academically rich. They're getting high quality instruction. And when they are in an academic safety environment, we have no question that they are getting instruction that is going to support their needs. When it comes to their social safety, that means that their social well-being is being taken care of. There are mechanisms in place, social emotional learning curriculum, or whatever through evaluation has been determined that is met. Case in point, when I had a campus I was running, or I was leading a campus, not only did we have curriculums, but we had other mechanisms like social, like community circles that operated throughout the day. We had restorative practices that came, that community organizations helped us facilitate it because we didn't have capacity through our own staff, right? So that would have been our social safety mechanisms in our campus, right? And we also had online mental health services, right? As well as in-person mental health services. So that was one way to help to ensure that our students were socially safe while they were with us. And then physical safety, right? So what are those pieces that help us make sure that our students are physically safe? And so that's just like discipline mechanisms, right? Like our systems and processes around our buildings, our facilities, but also what are our norms around making sure that our kids feel safe. So when we're talking about whole child, we're looking at what that entire experience is for students and how do we make sure that we have built systems around that the entire ecosystem for the student is meeting their needs and they are getting a great educational experience.
And so as you kind of think about just the past few years, right, and some of the different technology tools that have been more readily accessible, right, for educators to use with students, the AI of it all might be part of it too, but how has the meaning, right, of whole child shifted, as classrooms have become a bit more tech heavy?
As classrooms have become more tech heavy, right? It's one of those things where, we want to be careful about how we go with the flow.
Right.
And also be very thoughtful and diligent that we're not technology for technology's sake, but we're being very thoughtful and making sure that we're using the correct tool, the correct way for the correct outcome. Right. So, is it like I gave you the example of, mental health support, right? And so much of that, there are opportunities for mental health support that are available through technology now, right? That's available. There's social emotional learning that's available through technology. There's academic support that's available through technology. We can access a lot of things through technology, from interventions through courses. The whole courses through technology. I feel like I've leveraged a little bit of it all personally. And so, and not just AI. There's a presentation that I do with a partner, equity in AI, and looking at how we are making sure that we can access AI equitably throughout our classrooms, our schools, and our districts. Like, what would that look like? What questions are we asking when we're talking about accessing AI and using it equitably?
Yeah. And just that idea that these changes, these shifts, the new technology, right, maybe hasn't moved aside other pieces of the conversation, but it's just changed the direction, right, of some of these pieces.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned the mental health support, right, as an example. And some educators worry that more technology means less human connection, right? Others see it as a way to scale, right, our impact in different ways. There's, different perspectives and different experiences people have had, right, that inform, right, those opinions, right, or those perspectives, I guess, too. What is your response to that concern? Are you hearing that? Are you seeing that? Are you feeling that? Or is there something that you share when someone brings that to you?
Yeah. I think in my experiences, it's not going to move anyone aside that's not willing to grow with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The best technology is the technology in which we're telling it what to do.
Yeah.
If AI is as effective as the prompt.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If we're using it well. So any iteration of what we get is only going to give us something great if we tell it how great to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that's anything else, right? And I can even remember when I took over my classroom and got my curriculum and realized that they gave us those discs that had you could make your own quiz, and it had the quiz problems on it. Well, the quiz was only as good as the questions I selected.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing with every other technology, right? The support that you choose is only going to be as good as the research that you do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we have to do our due diligence. And making sure, once again, the goal is to make sure that we've met the need. Right. And so it's choosing the right tool for the right purpose to get the outcome that we need. And it sounds vague, but when we are getting in there and we're doing our homework and we're doing our research and we're getting really targeted, and that's one of the reasons why I emphasize data at the beginning. Every project and every work and probably every post that I do has some conversation about data, whether we're talking about assessment or whether we're talking about, I just did a whole thing about conflict walking into February, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's going to have some conversation about data, because if we're using that data to make these decisions, even when we're selecting our tech tools, then we're going to be headed down the right path to finding the correct opportunity for our kids, for our kids and our teachers.
A quick note from the presenter of today's episode, JotForm. JotForm lets you build a form in minutes. Student survey forms, homework submission forms, online quizzes, and so much more. You can start from scratch, or if you want to get a head start, check out their collection of free form templates designed with teachers, schools, and districts in mind. Learn more about JotForm and how educational institutions can get a 30% discount on JotForm Enterprise. Head to their website to learn more. jotform.com/enterprise/education. But that level of intention, I think, is really,
Absolutely
getting at, right? When it talks to the data piece, at least, when I think of, right, gathering information and using that information, right? We want to be intentional, right? And that helps us do that, right? So the work that you do, I think, is so important, right? For someone to say like, oh, I see this and now we're taking this action, or I've heard this, right, from the staff and now we're taking this action. And, one of the things that, I find when sharing technology with groups, maybe it's around formative assessment, right, just as an example, right, is this idea of what is the value add, or what's the benefit, or what are we doing different here? Like what are we choosing by choosing this technology? And, sometimes that connects to this idea of giving kids more options, more ways to share their learning. So I'm curious, from your experience, what are some ways you've seen technology help students feel seen, feel heard, especially those who might not always speak up in class?
And I think that's a great point. You asked the question, what are we choosing?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. And I one of the things that educators are still figuring out to do is how to choose student voice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think that's one of the things that's being lifted up in this whole conversation about technology, AI, and how we're seeing it used and when it's used well, is that students are being able to find their voice
Mm-hmm.
and being able to find it efficiently for within the context of what teachers are being able to build more efficiently without losing their expertise, their autonomy, the teacher losing their autonomy and their expertise.
I was gonna say, I think just like they're leveraging their experience, leveraging their expertise, like they are in the driver's seat, with this technology.
Yeah.
And,
They're being able to include all of the pieces. And I think that's one of the things that they are expecting. They're expecting to lose something because the technology is there and they're not. And I think that's one of the things for us as leaders. And I say this all the time, the rollout is imperative, right? The rollout, how we build this is imperative. And we are continuing to build planes while we are flying them. And so when we get to a point where we take the deep breath and, learn from our one-to-one rollouts, that we can take the time to build something great versus just feeling like we have to, once again, just kind of rush and get ahead of, because it's here and it's going to be here. It's not, so take the time to build something great and take the time to build it with teachers so they have a model of how to build it with kids. And it will look and feel a lot different than probably all of the technology initiatives we've had in the last 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because all of the rollouts have been so rushed because we have been in this race against circumstance.
Yeah.
Right. So, and there's been a lot of feeling like we didn't have time for agency on everybody's part. Right. But we're going to have to.
Yeah.
Because it's here, it's not going anywhere. And we'll stay on this hamster wheel.
Yeah. And, as you were, describing, I think the point that you made is really important for listeners who are trying to find that balance, right, of using some of these tools or relying on some of these tools. There's this moment when you jump into maybe a chat bot and you say, oh my gosh, this is going to replace what I do, right? But at one hand, it might replace or take on or cut in half the time, right? It might have taken something to do something in the past, but at the same time, you're in the driver's seat, right? You have the agency, like you mentioned, to really decide how to use these tools and how to use them to scale your impact, right? And to reach more students or reach more colleagues. And, that can feel like an awkward balance as you're trying to figure out, how to make the most of these tools and, the newer things that are out there to support, the whole child environment. So, I'm curious as we're kind of looking ahead, what trends do you think are going to influence how we support the whole child in the next 2 years, 3 years, 10 years? What is on your radar right now?
Well, I think, definitely how rapidly AI is evolving definitely stays on the radar.
Yeah.
Right. Because we just in these last 3 years, right, we've just seen it. I don't even know how to describe it. Flourish is not adequate.
Yeah, right. I'm like this exponential growth. I'm not sure exactly what the right word is to describe it. I understand what you mean there with that hesitation.
It's it's, it does something. It feels like every week there's a new trend, and folks enjoy it and they enjoy playing with it. But it does get intimidating to see the kids do things that you can't fathom with it, right? It really does. It's like, oh, how do I plan for this kind of thing? So that's one. And it is kind of difficult to wrap your head around not keeping up with AI, but growing with it.
Yeah.
So that is, because we've always kind of, figure it out and teach. We even lesson plan that way, right?
But that way you described it, just of growing with it as opposed to keeping up with it, I think is a really great mindset for someone who might feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Maybe, unsure what their next step is as they're navigating all of these changes, as they're trying to root their work in something that they've always known is important, like the whole child work that you do, right? And at the same time, right, maybe they feel like they have to keep up, but maybe it's more about growing with all of these new changes. And, as we wrap up together today and kind of think about these components, I love that message because I really do think it is a way to frame this conversation of this fast-paced technology and all of this, great work that you've spent so much time, dedicating to and supporting other schools and districts. And I want to make sure, anyone who's listening knows exactly where to go to continue this conversation, to stay connected with you. And we'll link out in the show notes to all the places for people, to find your work. But for someone who's listening as they're on the move or on the go and wants to make a mental bookmark is how I like to think of it, where can they connect with you? Where can they learn more about your work?
Sure. Thank you. And you can find me definitely on my website, drncgarrett.com. I am at Dr. NC Garrett, 2 R's, 2 T's on Instagram as well as LinkedIn. Those are the places where I am most active. I am also Dr. Chaunté Garrett on Facebook, and feel free to email me as well, Dr. NC Garrett at ledservices.com. I am very responsive as well and look forward to connecting with you all as well.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Garrett, for your time, the strategies you shared, the great examples that you shared for anyone who's curious about how to make sure, right, that they're supporting the whole child, right, even as things feel a little tech heavy. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. And thank you all.
It was lots of fun chatting with Dr. Chaunté Garrett today, and I want to finish up the episode, like we always do, with a few key points to make this EdTech a little bit easier. The whole child framework must address academic, social, and physical safety through intentional systems. Technology can enhance whole child supports when educators choose tools purposefully rather than using tech for its own sake. Student voice is a key part of whole child work, and technology can help elevate student voices, especially those who might not speak up in class. The rapid pace of AI development may feel overwhelming. Educators can benefit from a mindset shift towards growing with technology rather than keeping up. Remember, you can find the show notes and the full list of resources from today's episode by heading to easyedtechpodcast.com, including all of the ways to stay connected with Dr. Chaunté Garrett. A big thank you to Jotform, the presenter of today's episode and the special series. If you want to watch the video version of this episode, you can find it exclusively on Jotform's YouTube network. Just head to YouTube and type Jotform in the search bar. To learn more about Jotform and how educational institutions can get a 30% discount on Jotform Enterprise, head to jotform.com/enterprise/education. If you're listening to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or another favorite app, maybe even YouTube, don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button. When you follow along with the podcast, each new episode will download for you automatically so you don't miss a thing. It's totally free to follow or subscribe. It just helps you get those notifications so you know when a new episode is available. And if you have a moment and are feeling extra helpful today, please leave a rating or review for the podcast. It helps other educators find this podcast when they're searching for topics like ed tech in their podcast app. Have a great week and check back on Tuesday morning for another new episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast.